What if the Emperor's forgotten oath spoken in the last quiet hour before the galaxy drowned in its own madness has finally come due? What if the howl that once split the void has begun to rise again, not as memory, but as a warning? There are worlds in the far north of the Imperium where people swear they hear it in their dreams. A low, distant rumble like a wounded god dragging breath into his lungs. They whisper that the Wolf King is stirring. They whisper it because they fear it might be true, and because they fear what it means if it is. The Imperium has grown used to silence. Silence from dead Primarchs. Silence from those who vanished into myth. For 10,000 years, the sons of Russ have fought without their father, believing he would only return at the end of all things. Yet on Fenris, beneath skies the color of dying embers, omens gather like wolves around a corpse. Storms coil where no storm should exist. The seas convulse in spirals that no wind has shaped. And in the high places of Asaheim, runes carved before humanity learned fire have begun to glow with cold, impossible light. The space wolves do not speak of prophecy. They speak of sagas, blood oaths, and the long road of fate. But even they feel it's something ancient stalking the edges of the soul. Hunters say the beasts of Fenris are restless. Lone wolves have started turning their heads toward the west, sniffing at the air as if expecting their pack lord to return. In the Fang, the oldest iron priests swear the engines hum unfamiliar songs tones that match fragments of pre-heresy datacants. The rune priests' visions, once cryptic and scattered, now converge into a single terrible point. They say a shadow has stepped back into the mortal realm, and it carries the weight of an age. When the first sign came, it was not a miracle but a death. A strike cruiser assigned to patrol the far edge of the Sea of Stars found a planet erased from its charts. Not destroyed simply. Absent, as if carved out of existence. In its place hung a world of jagged stone and frost, a place with no designation and no orbital records. But the cruiser's augurs detected life, primitive, faint, and terrified. A scouting party descended. They returned with tales of a single crater the size of a city, carved into the ice as though a meteor had struck, except the walls were lined with claw marks hundreds of meters long. Something had come screaming out of the void. Something alive. News traveled quickly. Not through official channels, those are slow, bureaucratic, choked with fear, but through the rites of warriors who share a bond deeper than gene seed. Space wolves across distant crusades felt the same dream. A forest of silver trees, a throne of ice, and a figure hunched upon it, breathing frost. They did not need to speak the name. They felt it in their blood. The Wolf King was moving. And when a Primarch moves, worlds tremble. The great companies began to withdraw from distant fronts. Some called it desertion, but the wolves answered only with silence. They are sons of a Primarch who obeyed no authority save the Emperor's will and his own savage logic. On Fenris, stormfangs roared into the sky. Thunderhawks streaked across dark oceans. In the Fang's deepest vaults, the sarcophagi of ancient dreadnoughts opened, their inhabitants whispering forgotten war songs. Something was calling them home. Something they had prayed for and feared in equal measure. In the void beyond the Sea of Stars, a lone ship drift, a predatory silhouette forged in an age before the Imperium learned humility. Its hull bore scars of weapons unseen in 10,000 years, wounds etched by claws the size of titans. Its vox arrays were silent, but its presence was a shout. Wolves recognized their father's craft the way a cub recognizes the breath of its sire, but the ship was empty. No crew, no lights. Only a trail of frost in its corridors and runes freshly carved into the command throne. The hunt begins anew. Deep in the Fang, the rune priests gathered before the great fire pit, feeding it relics older than kingdoms. Their chants echoed through the stone halls like the heartbeat of a slumbering beast. They spoke of the Raufgr cycle, a saga unfinished, abandoned when Russ stepped into the Eye of Terror with his most loyal warriors. Those lines mention a return not triumphant, but burdened. A return marked by blood, betrayal, and the shattering of a final seal. The priests' voices trembled. Their visions showed the Wolf King walking through a storm of broken gods, carrying a wound that refuses to close. The truth came not from Fenris, but from a dying world swallowed by heresy. An Imperial outpost on the edge of the Ghoul Stars sent a distress call, garbled, panicked, ending in a howl that pierced the Vox like a spear. By the time reinforcements arrived, the world was in ruins. But not all ruins speak the same language. The dead Chaos Warband was torn apart with precision, hacked down by something faster than any Astartes. Tracks marked the earth, not of tanks or beasts, but of boots forged for a warrior larger than any living space marine. And on a shattered altar of the dark gods lay a single pelt of gray fur, stained with old, golden blood. The Imperium does not believe in hope. Hope is treason. Hope gets worlds killed. But this was not hope. This was recognition, terror, relief, awe across Fenris. When the rune priests placed their hands upon ancient stone, they felt the same truth. Russ had re-entered the galaxy, not as a savior, not as a conqueror, but as a hunter who has finally found the scent he has chased across millennia. The rune priests whispered one more truth, a truth they dared not speak aloud. Russ was not alone. Shadows walked with him, warriors whose names were sung only in the earliest sagas, the 13th Company, or what remained of them. Now the Fang itself trembles. Deep beneath its foundations, the oldest vaults react to a presence that has not touched the Imperium since the Age of Legends. Doors sealed before the Horus heresy grind open, lightless chambers awaken, and within them, relics long thought mythical begin to stir, blades forged for a king, armor etched with runes that predate the Imperium, and a throne carved for a son who abandoned it for duty. The Fang is preparing itself, as if welcoming home its master, or bracing for something far darker. But across the stars, another truth rises, far more troubling, far more uncertain. Because wherever Russ walks, he leaves questions, not answers. On the ruined world in the Ghoul Stars, where his tracks were found, there was one last artifact discovered. A single stone tablet carved with Fenrisian runes. It had been placed deliberately, as though meant to be found. The inscription is short, ominous, almost gentle in its cruelty. It reads, "The foe I once sought has awakened. I follow the last trail. Do not seek me. The end is not as you remember." And yet, even as the Imperium reels, even as Fenris prepares for a homecoming drenched in prophecy, even as the sons of Russ lift their heads to the void, sensing their father's presence, something else is happening. Something quieter, buried, forbidden, in the vaults beneath the Fang, in a chamber sealed by Russ himself before his departure 10,000 years ago. A lock has begun to melt, not open melt, as though exposed to a heat that does not exist in the mortal realm, as though something inside has awakened after an age of dreaming. The runes around the vault flicker, the stone trembles, and every rune priest on Fenris turns, feeling a cold breath brush the back of their necks. Something sacred has shifted, something sealed for a reason, something Russ himself may fear returning to. The Wolf King walks the stars once more. But he is not the only thing returning, and whatever stirs beneath the Fang is waiting for him. The vault beneath the Fang continued to tremble, groaning like an ancient beast roused from troubled sleep. Frost dripped from runes that should never melt, each drop hissing as if touching something alive beneath the stone. Across Fenris, a quiet dread settled into the bones of every warrior. They felt it in the marrow, a shift not born of prophecy, but of inevitability. Some swore the sky dimmed when the vault stirred, as though the sun itself feared what lay imprisoned beneath its light. But while the Fang shuddered, the galaxy whispered louder. Reports came of worlds experiencing omens, wolves howling where none lived, storms appearing on dead moons, the air tasting faintly of iron and winter. Even the most hardened wolves refused to dismiss these signs. Something was moving in the dark, something that knew the Wolf King was returning, and sought to reach him first. Far from Fenris, aboard a drifting cruiser near the Maelstrom, a kill team of space wolves sifted through the aftermath of a massacre. Corpses lay twisted around a shattered altar, their armor still steaming from unnatural heat. Brother Hunter Kiarl knelt beside a fallen priest, tracing the burn patterns on his flesh. No weapon they knew caused such wounds. The rune priest accompanying them murmured that the spiritual residue felt familiar, not comforting, not safe, but kin. An echo of Fenris that had no right to exist in this forsaken part of space. Kiarl felt the hairs on his neck rise. This was no random slaughter. Someone had been searching the outpost for something, or someone. And the only clue left behind was a claw mark etched into the deck plating, deeper than Serenade should ever allow. It pointed toward the galactic north. On Fenris, the Great Council convened beneath the Fang's highest vault. The air smelled of incense and cold metal. Volf lords debated in snarls, their voices colliding like storm winds. Some demanded they pursue Russ immediately, taking every great company with them. Others insisted caution, for a Primarch returns only when the galaxy is ready to break. Jarl Fenric of the Iron Hull Company spoke with iron fury, arguing that the Imperium would seek to cage Russ with politics and dogma, the way they had caged Guilliman. But Grimbold Firemane countered with a darker warning. What if the Primarch who returned was not the same man who left? What if 10,000 years of hunting in the eye had twisted him in ways no saga could capture? Silence followed his words like frost creeping across glass. Beyond the Fang's walls, common soldiers felt the weight of these omens more intimately than their lords. In the barracks, young Bloodclaws whispered stories of Russ wrestling demons with his bare hands or walking through storms of warp fire untouched. They boasted, laughed, and argued, but beneath it all, fear lingered. Not fear of the Wolf King, but fear of what his return must signify. Across the Imperium, ordinary guardsmen felt it too. Sermons grew harsher. Chaplains thundered about the coming trial, while civilians lit candles in devotion or despair. Where hope flickered, fear shadowed it. Where faith rose, doubt gnawed at its edges. The Emperor's will, once a distant certainty, now felt as unreadable as the warp itself. And in that uncertainty, rumors flourished like infection, whispering that the end times were not approaching, they had begun. In the Ghoul Stars, the echoes of Russ's passage thickened. A task force led by Wolf Lord Jerry Stormark tracked signs of the Primarch to a Deadforge world half-consumed by rust. As they descended, they found battlefields layered in ash. Traitor warbands lay shredded, their demonic allies torn apart as though by fangs the size of blades. In the center of the devastation stood a monolithic gate of obsidian, cracked and steaming. A gate of souls, known only in legends. But it had been broken from the inside. Tracking runes showed that Russ had passed through mere hours earlier. Yet the warp around the gate still shivered, as though something else had come through as well. Something that followed him not as ally, but hunter. Stormark felt a weight settle on him, the sense that they were no longer pursuing Russ, but trailing behind a war already underway. In the Fang's deepest sanctum, Rune Priest Haldry Greyhollow sought answers. She placed her palm upon the trembling vault and closed her eyes, letting the rune's cold whisper seep into her mind. She expected to feel the echo of Russ, the familiar fury, the boundless loyalty, the soul forged in winter storms. Instead, she felt nothing but a void, a hollow absence where something immense should reside. And beneath that void, a heartbeat that did not belong to any Primarch. Haldry recoiled, gasping as frost bloomed across her fingers. Something imprisoned within the vault was awakening in response to Russ's return, but it was not calling to him, it was warning him. And as she steadied herself, she realized the runes on the vault had changed. They now formed a single phrase, "Not all sons are loyal." Far across the Imperium, in the shadowed halls of the Senatorum Imperialis, political tremors erupted. Word of Russ's possible return leaked into the upper ranks, igniting fear masked as concern. High lords argued in hushed tones. Some saw a returning Primarch as salvation, a weapon of living legend. Others saw him as a threat to their power. Whisper networks hummed. Orders were drafted and shredded. A secret conclave even dared to discuss whether Russ should be guided, contained, or redirected upon his return. But Guilliman's representatives intervened, warning that such debates bordered on heresy. Yet none could deny the tension. The Imperium claims unity, but unity forged in terror always fractures when gods return from exile. And in the darkest corners of Terra, a handful of masked figures illuminated a forbidden sigil. A wolf split in two, one half snarling, the other bleeding. Back on Fenris, the warp winds thickened around the world like a shroud. The sky dimmed unnaturally as a storm of aurora-like light twisted above the Fang. Warriors knelt instinctively, unsure whether they were witnessing a miracle or warning. From the storm descended a rain of ash, though no volcano stirred. Rune priests read omens in the drifting flakes, each one smoldering with faint, ghost-like runes. They were fragments of a prophecy older than Fenris itself. The meaning was unclear, but its tone was unmistakable: sorrow, betrayal, and a brother's blade. As they deciphered the runes, an earthquake rippled across the mountains. The vault beneath them groaned again, louder, deeper, closer to breaking. And the Fang itself seemed to exhale, as though preparing to meet something it had not welcomed in millennia. On the ruined Forge world, Stormarch's forces reached the final chamber of the shattered gate. There, etched into the floor with Russ's own claws, was a message. Not a warning, not a farewell, a confession. I found the truth. The hunt was a lie. Beneath the inscription lay a broken chain of blackened metal, a fragment of shackles designed not for mortals, but for a being of terrifying power. Stormarch's voice cracked as he ordered a full retreat. The meaning was clear. Russ had not spent 10,000 years hunting his foes. He had been hunting the truth. And whatever he uncovered had driven him to break something older than the Imperium, something imprisoned for eons. And whatever that something was, it was now free. When the report reached the Fang, the vault finally cracked. A single fissure split its surface, releasing a howl that froze every heart in the fortress. Warriors dropped to their knees. Rune priests clutched their temples, blood leaking from their eyes. A presence surged outward, ancient, furious, betrayed. The vault's runes dimmed, and then extinguished completely. And in the last flicker of psychic clarity before the vault burst open, Haldry Greyhollow understood the truth. Russ had not sealed away an enemy under the Fang. He had sealed away a son. A son who should never have been born. A son who now awakens in the dark, hungry for answers and vengeance. The Volf King walks the stars, but the first of his forgotten children is about to rise beneath Fenris. And his awakening will change everything. The Fang shook with a violence not felt since the days when Russ himself strode through its halls. Dust rained from vaulted ceilings, ancient statues cracked, and the mountain groaned like it feared what was awakening beneath it. Warriors rushed through corridors with their bolters drawn, yet their oaths felt hollow in the face of such primal dread. For the first time in living memory, seasoned Wolf priests stammered in prayer. Across Fenris, storms erupted without warning, lightning spiraling in unnatural arcs that clawed at the sky. And through the ruinous thunder, some swore they heard a voice, not Russ's, but younger, raw, filled with a grief that burned like fresh forged iron. A son forgotten by history, awakened in chains. A son who had never known a father but had inherited his fury. And with every tremor, the sense grew stronger. He was no longer sleeping. Far from Fenris, the shockwaves of this awakening rippled through the warp like cracks in a frozen lake. Librarians across a dozen crusades clutched their heads, writhing under visions not their own. A guardsman on Vigilus collapsed mid-prayer, screaming of a wolf made of shadows and sorrow. In the ecclesiarchy, sermons shifted subtly. Priests hesitated before proclaiming the emperor's will, as though fearing the silence that followed. For the Imperium was a realm built on certainty, and certainty now bled away like water through broken stone. Even Guilliman felt a disturbance in the psychic veil, pausing mid-council as a phantom howl brushed against his mind. He recognized the signature of Russ, but intertwined with something new. Something that should not exist. Something sealed away by a brother who had never explained why. While the galaxy trembled, a small detachment of space wolves descended into the Fang's depths. They moved through unlit tunnels, their armor glistening with frost that formed in moments. Wolfguard Thrain carried a relic torch, its flame flickered blue, reacting to the surge of psychic force nearby. As they reached the threshold of the broken vault, a wave of despair washed over them. Not fear, despair, the kind that seeped into old wounds and whispered that every oath ever sworn was a lie. The vault door hung open, molten at the edges as though something had burned its way out with a hatred older than language. Inside, chains lay in coils across the floor, each link as thick as an arm, each one smoldering. The warriors raised their weapons, but in their hearts they all knew they were already too late. Within the shattered chamber, a single figure knelt among the ruins, not a Primarch, not yet a monster. Something caught between. His form was massive, but not fully grown into the stature of his lineage. His skin glowed faintly with runic light wounded by time. Long, unkempt hair hung like a pelt of night. When he lifted his head, his eyes held none of Russ's warmth, only a depthless sorrow paired with a fury that burned cold. He whispered a single word, "Father." The sound echoed like a shard of broken faith. But when no answer came, his grief hardened into rage. His voice thundered through the chamber, cracking stone pillars. "Where is he? Why did he leave me in the dark?" The warriors surrounding him felt their souls recoil, yet none dared fire. They saw in him a reflection of their own hidden doubts. As the lost son of Russ rose, the chamber darkened. Not from lack of light, but from something pulling at the air, bending it inward. Psychic pressure flooded outward, forcing even the Wolfguard to their knees. Visions filled their minds. Russ sealing the vault long ago, sorrow etched across his face. A child crying out behind an iron door. A hunt through the warp. Lies told for survival. Truth buried in frost. The visions blurred, twisted, until one image remained clear. Russ standing before the Emperor, blood on his hands, chains glowing behind him. A sacrifice made, a sin never confessed. And above it all, a whisper from the warp. What the Father hides, the Son will reveal. The psychic surge broke, leaving the warriors gasping. The lost son staggered, clutching his skull, as if tormented by memories not his own. Outside, the storm intensified until the skies cracked like shattered ice. On Fenris's oceans, waves rose higher than fortress walls, battering the shores with unstoppable force. Packs of native beasts fled inland, howling in confusion. The people of Fenris gathered in their huts, muttering prayers to Russ, the Allfather, and any spirit who might still listen. But their prayers drifted unanswered. In the Fang's observatory, Rune Priest Haldry stared into the storm with widening eyes. She realized the psychic pattern was not random, it was a beacon. A call, a scream of awakening powerful enough to ripple through the warp. Whatever had escaped the vault was not hiding. It was reaching, searching, and something in the warp had answered its call. Haldry whispered, "We are no longer alone in this storm." Across the Imperium, subtle fractures widened into chasms. A Forge world declared independence, claiming the Omnissiah had revealed a truth that High Lords had hidden. An entire regiment of Astra Militarum turned their guns inward after witnessing their chaplain melt into golden light mid-sermon. The Inquisition scrambled to contain these outbreaks, but every victory birthed two new heresies. And on Terra, beneath the palace, a lone custodian paused during his silent watch. For the first time in millennia, he felt a ripple through the Emperor's psychic aura, a flicker, faint as a dying ember, not weakening, not fading, reacting, as though the Emperor himself recognized the awakening of the forgotten sun, and did not welcome it. Back in the depths of the Fang, the lost son staggered toward the exit, each step cracking the ice beneath him. Thrain blocked his path, not with arrogance, with duty. He spoke gently, telling the young giant that Russ had not abandoned him, that the sagas spoke only what they could bear. But the sun stared through him, tears freezing on his cheeks. If he loved me, he would have freed me. Thrain lowered his weapon, heart breaking. He locked you away to save you, the sun snarled, eyes glowing like twin suns. From what? Thrain hesitated. That silence was a knife, the sun roared, shaking the chamber. What was I made to be? The question hung like a curse neither of them could lift. The lost sun pushed past the warriors, ascending toward the upper vaults. Each step he took pulled the storm tighter around Fenris. Above, the sky twisted into a spiral of frost and warp light. The wolves gathered in the Fang's gray hall, watching as the doors shuddered. Some whispered that this was the moment Russ would return. Others whispered prayers to strengthen their souls. When the doors burst inward, the sight that greeted them froze every warrior. The son of Russ, unknown, unrecorded, impossible, stood framed against the storm, his presence warping the air. But his gaze held not hatred, not hunger, only a truth none could bear. He spoke softly, voice trembling. I have remembered everything. Then his form shifted, shadows coiling around him, psychic energy spiraling upward. The storm outside answered, descending in a pillar of blackened frost. The wolves felt the galaxy tilt, as though a hidden truth had finally come into focus. For the lost son was not merely some forgotten heir. He was a weapon forged in secret. A weapon Russ had sealed away to save the Imperium. A weapon that was now awake and changing. And whatever he was becoming, it was something the galaxy was not meant to survive. The lost son's transformation cast a pall over the Fang, a silence so heavy it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Warriors who had known no fear in centuries stood motionless as frost caused their armor, whispering like 1,000 tiny voices urging them to run. The storm outside tightened into a vortex of cold light, drawn to the shifting figure as though the heavens recognized him or recoiled from him. In that stillness, Wolf-Lord Grimbold Firemane realized something terrifying. This was no accident of fate, no misguided creation. This was a reckoning, a living sin thawed from the ice. A truth denied by time, now given form. And as the lost son lifted his gaze to the gathered warriors, they felt a weight behind his eyes far older than any mortal lifetime. The weight of memories stolen, buried, and now flooding back like a broken dam. He staggered once as visions rippled through him, each one cracking the air like splintering glass. He saw Russ not as the sagas painted him, not the laughing king, the fierce brother, the loyal son, but as a man bent beneath unbearable knowledge. Saw him binding runes around a crib of cold metal. Saw him kneel in the vault, carving his final words into stone before sealing it forever. Saw him whisper to the Emperor, voice breaking, "Forgive me. I have made a weapon to kill what cannot be killed." The lost son gasped, clutching his head. When he spoke again, his voice trembled with horror. He didn't lock me away because I was dangerous. He locked me away because of what he made me to destroy. The hall erupted in murmurs, but beneath them all ran a thread of dread that no oath could quiet. Above Fenris, the warp began to thin, pulling taut like a veil stretched across burning glass. Imperial astropaths across the sector screamed in unison, blind from sudden psychic ruptures. A fleet guarding a nearby trade route drifted off course as its navigators fell into frenzies of prophecy, muttering of a predator lurking between stars, a creature shaped like a wolf, but with a heart of lightning and sorrow. Even Gilliman, traversing the segmentum solar, felt the disturbance as a painful spark across his gene-wrought senses. He ordered immediate lockdown of all Imperial records pertaining to the Space Wolves, but secrecy was a fragile shield. rumors spread faster than fire. Some claimed a second Primarch had risen. Others whispered of a demon wearing a Primarch's face. And deeper still, in forbidden circles, some dared to voice heresy. Perhaps the Emperor had not told all truths about his sons. Within the Fang, the lost son's presence pulled memories to the surface of every warrior around him. They saw not their glorious past, but fractures hidden beneath centuries of bravado. Brothers lost in the heresy, worlds burned in loyalty's name, mistakes disguised as valor. Even the oldest rune priests bowed under the weight, feeling their sagas unravel into raw, unadorned truth. The son's voice echoed again, softer now, as though addressing ghosts. He made me to face something coming. Something he feared above all. Something even the Emperor refused to fight. Thrain stepped forward, hands trembling. "What is it?" The son blinked. For a heartbeat, his form seemed to settle, and in that fleeting moment, he looked heartbreakingly human, like a child asking why the world hurts so much. "I do not know. But it is coming for him. And for all his sons." The great horns of the Fang bellowed suddenly, drowning the hall in thunder. From the watchtowers came the cry of watch serfs. A fleet approaching Fenris. Transponder codes Imperial, but heavily encrypted. The wolves tensed, unsure whether this was rescue, surveillance, or political noose. Stormcaller Kialma snarled, "Terra comes not with answers, but chains." The lost son turned toward the massive gates, sensing something in the void. He whispered, "They fear me." Then after a pause heavy with grief, "As he did." Outside, storm clouds fractured as the first of the Imperial ships broke through, their prows lit by the golden glow of the Astronomicon. Yet the light did not comfort. It felt accusatory, as if judging Fenris from orbit, as if preparing to decide its fate before hearing its plea. Aboard the lead vessel, Inquisitor Izera Vok watched the planet turn beneath her with guarded contempt. Reports had been erratic, contradictory. Whispers of a new Primarch, a psychic storm, an awakening beneath the Fang. She did not believe in miracles. She believed in containment. "Purge, silence, wolves," she muttered, "always bringing ruin in their wake." But even she hesitated as psychic static rolled through the bridge, rattling machinery and nerves alike. Her navigator muttered that Fenris felt alive, its psychic aura shifting like a wounded beast. Vok ordered her forces ready. The Imperium would not allow an unsanctioned Primarch to rise. Not now, not ever. And deep in her cold gaze, the first sparks of dread flickered, because she felt watched, as though something below weighed her soul and found it wanting. Back in the Fang, the lost son paced like a caged titan, the storm responding to every breath he took. The wolves debated in frantic whispers, their unity fracturing under the strain. Some argued he must be protected, the blood of Russ, the future of their legion. Others insisted he must be restrained until they understood the truth. But the son silenced them with a single weary sentence, "I am neither weapon nor heir." I am the wound he tried to hide. His skin flickered again, runes glowing beneath the flesh like molten veins. Haldry felt her heart twist. He was becoming something not entirely flesh, not entirely warp. Something born of desperation and forbiddance ritual. Something not meant to exist outside the vault. And every moment he remained awake, the storm swelled, feeding on his presence. The first Imperial torpedoes hit Fenris's atmosphere minutes later, not warheads, but drop pods. A declaration. A warning. The wolves roared in fury, their howls echoing through the chambers as they prepared for the intruders. Even now, at the brink of internal collapse, they stood ready to bleed for their home. But the lost son simply watched the pods descend, eyes filled with ancient sorrow. "They come to kill me." Thrain shook his head violently. "No, to judge. And to fear." The son gave a hollow smile. "Fear becomes execution in your Imperium." Outside, the horizon blazed as pod engines ignited the storm clouds, turning the sky into a furnace. The Imperium had arrived, and with it, the crushing weight of judgment. As the first squads of inquisitorial stormtroopers entered the Fang's outer sanctuaries, something inside the lost son broke. Not with violence, with understanding. A memory surfaced. Russ kneeling before him, whispering through tears, "You will be hated, but you will save them. I pray you never awaken." Another flash. The Emperor's face, cold and distant, pronouncing something that felt less like approval and more like sentence. The son exhaled, frost rolling from his lips. "I was not sealed away to protect the Imperium." He looked toward the encroaching forces, then back to his brothers who stared at him with love and terror intertwined. "I was sealed away to protect him." Lightning struck the Fang's peak, splitting stone and sky in a blinding roar. And as the lost son stepped forward, runes blazing, the storm bent to him fully, a god's breath drawn before release. History held still. The next heartbeat would decide the fate of the Imperium. Ash drifted through the shattered vaults where the last echoes of battle still trembled against the stone, as if the world itself remembered the screams too clearly to let them go. Smoke curled in thin dying threads, clinging to shattered statues of saints whose faces had been erased by bolter fire and sorrow. In that ruin-lit silence, the shape of destiny walked with a limp, its breath shallow, its heartbeat slowing. The Wolf King stood amid the craters and corpses, frost-rimmed armor cracked and steaming, the blade in his hand trembling from the weight of what had just been done. Not the battle he had weathered thousands, but the truth carved into him by a single dying whisper from the creature wearing his brother's stolen face. A truth that made even Leman Russ, the Emperor's chosen predator, feel as though something vast and cold had reached out across millennia to claim him. And when the wind shifted, he felt Fenris calling not as a memory, but as a wound. Night rolled in like a tide of ink, smothering the fires one ember at a time. Pack brothers gathered around him in a half-circle of reverent exhaustion, armor ruined, eyes hollowed by visions none dared speak aloud. They had seen shapes in the warp blaze. They had heard songs beneath the screams. And each believed, with the certainty of a condemned soul, that the veil between mortal and myth had thinned to a breaking point. A wolf priest knelt beside Russ, placing a gaunted hand against the Primarch's knee, searching for words that might anchor a being forged in divine fire. But Russ only stared toward the horizon, where lightning crawled across the land like veins of some dreaming giant. "The hunt is not yet done," he murmured, more to the dead than to the living. His voice felt wrong quiet, fragile, as though holding back a storm that might unmake the night itself. Across the ruins, mortal soldiers dragged themselves through the dust, their prayers cracked and frantic, their faith bleeding from them as surely as their lifeblood. Some whispered blessings, others confessed sins to the wind. A dying sergeant, ribcage shattered, reached out for a passing rune priest and begged to know if the Emperor had seen him. The psyker paused, eyes clouded with frost and grief, and told the man that the Emperor saw all who bled in his name, even when the galaxy did not. It was a lie, or perhaps a kindness. But the soldier died smiling, believing the master of mankind had looked upon him for a heartbeat. And in the strange, wavering twilight, that hope felt like the last light left in a universe intent on devouring itself. Then came the rumble, distant, seismic, like mountains grinding together beneath the crust. The surviving wolves raised their weapons, forming a living wall around their Primarch. The storm clouds above twisted into spirals of unnatural geometry, bleeding colors that should not exist, hues that hurt the mind as much as the eye. Even Russ tensed, scenting the warp on the air like poison leaking from a fresh corpse, but no demon emerged. No heretic army marched. Instead, the earth split open in a slow, deliberate shudder, revealing an ancient chamber beneath the battlefield. Its walls shimmered with runes older than the Imperium, older than Fenris, older perhaps than humanity itself. Russ stepped toward it, drawn as if by a memory he never lived. The others followed, because to abandon him now would be to abandon purpose itself. Inside the cavern, The air grew colder, thick with the scent of winter storms and forgotten oaths. Ice runes pulsed along the walls, glowing faintly like dying stars, but alive enough to whisper. The chamber felt neither sacred nor cursed. It felt expectant, as though it had been waiting for this precise moment across 10,000 years. Russ placed his hand upon a frost-covered monolith, and the stone shifted, revealing a hollow core containing bones not human. Not Xenos, but something between myth and nightmare. A throne of fangs and iron surrounded the relic, carved with sigils that spoke of betrayal, rebirth, and a hunt unfinished. When Russ leaned closer, the bones shuddered, exhaling a breath of frigid air that extinguished every torch and lumen. Darkness swallowed them whole, leaving only the sound of a distant heartbeat, slow, massive, and unmistakably alive. A warped vision struck them then, not in images but in sensations. The taste of iron seas, the howl of a moon torn open, the touch of claws scraping at the edge of reality. The wolves collapsed to their knees, overwhelmed, but Russ remained standing, his silhouette shaking as the vision clawed inside him. He saw his father not as emperor, but as war-made, flesh-cold, inexorable, unstoppable. He saw his brothers falling, their legions burning, their souls dragged screaming into the coil of eternity. And he saw one figure walking toward him across a field of bones, a version of himself, older, ragged, eyes blazing with something beyond mere fury. When the two Russes met in the vision, the older one whispered a truth that fractured the moment like a blade driven into stone. Russ gasped and staggered back as the vision shattered, leaving only silence. The wolves scrambled to their feet, weapons raised, demanding answers with ragged breaths. Russ did not answer. Could not. Instead, he turned toward the cavern's entrance, his eyes unfocused, as though he were seeing something far beyond the mortal spectrum. The Wolf priest approached him again, this time with fear hidden beneath centuries of discipline. "Father," he rasped, "what did the vision show you?" Russ remained still for a long, unbearable moment. Then he whispered, "A future without the Allfather's light. And a choice only a monster can make." His words tasted like frostbite, like endings. Around him, the chamber's runes dimmed to a sickly pallor, as if recoiling from the truth one of their own had finally unveiled. They emerged from the cavern into a sky boiling with warp storms, the clouds forming shapes that stalked the horizon like predators seeking prey. The battlefield outside had changed. Even the corpses seemed rearranged, as though some unseen hand had moved them into patterns meant for ritual or warning. The air felt wrong, too dense, too quiet, as if the universe were drawing in a breath before screaming. Packs of wolves tightened their formation, shielding mortals as they advanced toward the extraction ridge. But the mortals no longer looked at Russ with awe or devotion. They looked with uncertainty, with fear, for something in him had shifted, the way he carried himself, the way shadows clung to him, the faint frost drifting from his eyes. He was still their father, their king, but something ancient now walked within him, wearing his soul like a cloak. When they reached the ridge, a vox howl cut through the storm, an astropathic scream, raw and distorted, filled with terror. It spoke of an entire system lost in a single night, its world silenced, their shrines desecrated with symbols matching those found in the cavern below. It spoke of a traitor fleet approaching under false banners, imperial banners. And worst of all, it spoke of a name once thought lost to history, now whispered through the warp like a knife slid gently between ribs. Russ froze. The wolves sensed it instantly, his heartbeat quickening, his breath sharpening, the old hunt awakening behind his eyes. The name repeated, and again, and again. Something sacred had been defiled. Something long buried had risen, and the Wolf King knew the hunt had just become a reckoning. The storm that had once raged across the scarred horizon had finally died, leaving only the slow drift of ash and the hollow whisper of wind threading through shattered monuments. Where armies had clashed, where faith had been tested and found wanting, now only fading echoes remained. The Wolf King stood at the edge of a valley carved into ruin, gazing upon the remnants of a world broken not by enemy fire alone, but by the weight of truth revealed. His armor, cracked and darkened by the final fury of battle, gleamed faintly beneath the pallid light of a sun, struggling to pierce the soot-laden sky. Around him, his sons tended the wounded and murmured quiet prayers for the dead, their voices subdued, softened by exhaustion and the gravity of what they had witnessed. The air held the ghost of war's heat, but its fury had burned itself out. Now there was only the cold that follows endings. Russ breathed it in, steadying himself against a sorrow older than the Imperium itself. When dawn crawled across the ruined landscape, it did so with a weary reluctance, illuminating the scars of a conflict that had reached deeper than flesh or stone. Packs of space wolves wandered through fields of fallen brothers and mortal allies, retrieving dog tags, icons, and fragments of armor tokens for the sagas that would be carved in their memory halls. Yet as they worked, there lingered a weight in their eyes, a lingering remnant of the revelations torn from the warp's abyss. They moved like men walking through a dream carved from sorrow and frost. A rune priest knelt beside a broken banner half buried in ash and traced its torn fabric with trembling fingers, as if uncertain whether the symbol it bore still meant what it once had. Russ watched them all quietly, and for the first time since his return, he felt the crushing pressure of destiny loosen its claws from his throat. Not release, never release, but a moment of stillness, the brief breath before truth becomes legend. The mortals who survived gathered at the foot of a cracked basilica, huddled beneath its fractured dome where star maps once glowed with celestial order. Now only dust-covered glass and faint, flickering runes remained, casting long, trembling lines of light across their faces. Some prayed in silence, clutching relics that had lost their shine. Others stared into nothing, their eyes still haunted by the shapes seen in warp fire and shadow. A chaplain with a shattered helmet recounted psalms to steady their spirits, but even his voice trembled with strain. Outside, Russ approached the basilica's broken gates, pausing as if listening for a heartbeat that no longer lived within its fractured heart. He placed a gaunted hand upon the stone cold, brittle, steeped in memories that were not his, and for a moment he imagined hearing the Emperor's voice. Not the commanding thunder he once knew, but a whisper threaded with distance, sorrow, and something like apology. A soft snow began to fall, drifting through the lingering smoke like tears shed by a sky witnessing the aftermath of its own failure. It settled upon corpses and craters, hiding the wounds of war beneath a fragile blanket of white. The wolves moved through it like spirits, their breath frost-lit, their footfalls softened by the accumulating veil. Beneath the half-frozen surface of a shallow pool, Russ saw his own reflection ripple and distort, eyes older, colder, haunted by futures shown in choices yet unmade. For a fleeting instant, he saw another version of himself staring back, the one from the vision, the one who had walked across a field of bones to deliver a warning. Their gazes met across time's fractured mirror, and Russ felt a shiver crawl along his spine. Then the reflection faded, leaving only his scarred face and the quiet lapping of water against stone. The world seemed to exhale. At the valley's center, a pyre had been raised vast solemn, adorned with sigils of Fenris and purity seals inked with the names of the fallen. One by one, survivors gathered around it, offering tokens of remembrance. Broken blades, fragments of armor, torn banners stained with the blood of heroes. When the fire was lit, it roared up into the sky like the breath of some ancient spirit, its flames casting long shadows that danced across the ruined battlefield. The warmth of it touched Russ's face, but did nothing to soften the coldness within him. As the pyre burned, a wolf priest stepped beside him. "Their saga ends here," he murmured. Russ did not look away from the flames as he answered, "No saga ends. It only changes shape." His voice carried a quiet weight, as if he were speaking not to the priest, but to the galaxy itself, reminding it that stories do not die, they endure, even when their tellers cannot. The pyre burned through the long hours of dusk, its embers drifting skyward like fading souls. When night reclaimed the battlefield, the stars emerged with unsettling clarity, unblinking and vast. Under that cold tapestry, Russ walked alone across the remnants of war. His steps carried him to the ridge where he had first heard the astropathic scream of betrayal, where destiny had turned its gaze upon him with merciless intent. Now the ridge lay quiet, its stones scarred but still standing. The silence felt almost sacred. He knelt there, resting his hand upon the ground, and whispered a vow meant for no ears but the void's. The wind answered with a low, mournful howl, one that echoed faintly with the timbre of Fenris's ancient storms. It felt like acknowledgement, or warning, or perhaps both. In the distance, the remaining ships of the Space Wolves stood ready for departure, their hulls illuminated by the glow of exhausted engines. Packs moved up the embarkation ramps with solemn purpose, their armor bearing new marks that would not be spoken of until long after the saga was carved in runes. Before Russ turned to join them, he took one last look at the world they were leaving behind. Its cities had collapsed into their own shadows. Its temples stood like broken teeth against the horizon. And its survivors, those who refused to leave, watched the wolves with a mixture of gratitude, fear, and reverence. They did not cheer. They simply bowed their heads as the Wolf King passed, as though sensing that something monumental had occurred, something beyond mortal comprehension. Something that would shape the centuries to come. Aboard the flagship, the air hummed with low chants and the distant rumble of engines preparing to pierce the void. Russ strode through the corridors, passing warriors who saluted with weary respect. The ship felt different, now quieter, heavier, its bulkheads absorbing the unspoken truth carried back from the cavern's depths. He entered the stratagem, where a hololithic map flickered weakly, displaying scattered worlds on the brink of heresy or ruin. With a gesture he dimmed it, unable to bear the sight of so many fires igniting across the Imperium. For a long moment he stood alone, head bowed, the weight of command pressing upon him like the crushing gravity of a dead star. When he finally lifted his gaze, something in his expression had changed, not hope, not despair, but acceptance. The hunt would continue. Because it must. When the fleet rose into the black expanse of space, the world below dwindled into a fading ember, one more scar upon a galaxy drowning in its own history. The stars stretched into lines of cold fire as the ships accelerated, and within the flagship's observation deck, Russ watched the void unfold. His reflection hovered in the glass, half shadow, half light, as though caught between two destinies. Behind him, a wolf priest spoke quietly. "What lies ahead, Father?" Russ did not turn. His voice was a low, distant rumble, a truth the Imperium is not ready to hear. "And a storm it will not survive unchanged." The void answered with silence, eternal and indifferent. And so the chronicle ends for now, not in triumph nor in utter ruin, but in the quiet space between breaths where legends pause before resuming their march through eternity. The Wolf King has returned, carrying revelations that could unmake empires or save them. But what is salvation in a galaxy that devours its own children? And what becomes of faith when the shadows speak louder than the saints? If you found meaning in this tale, if the echoes of its saga stirred something within you, then like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments so the chronicle may continue.